Morning everyone. This is the webinar on data sharing in both directions between CaBA and the water companies. So I thought we'd just start with a, a bit of an introduction to where we are at the moment, so that we all start from the same place. Sorry. We've got the CaBA data package, which is a great first sort of start, and Lucy's going to go through that today and go through all the elements of it which relate to water company data. But the biggest gap in the CaBA data package is probably water company data, and without that we really can't understand urban hydrology at all, or only very partially. And so we've been kind of we've recognised that for quite a while. Probably the second biggest gap in the CaBA data package is monitoring data. Now we've got data in the data package from the Environment Agency, monitoring data, and we're starting to put in more data from third parties like CaBA partnerships, and this is going to be a real emphasis over the next 5 years, getting more and more data out of partnerships and into and made available, and that's going to be, you know, one of the main themes of the Catchment monitoring cooperative, let's say, over the next 5 years. We also don't have any much data from water companies in there in terms of monitoring. So those are the two sort of big gaps we've got for taking data from water companies and giving data back to water companies. So this webinar is really about looking at where we've got to at the moment, so and some of the really good examples of data sharing that we've had, and case studies, and then looking forward and seeing what we could, where we can go. And I'm going to quote an old boss of mine who said, "Don't come to me with problems, come with solutions." So we all know there's plenty of barriers to sharing data between ourselves, in CaBA and water companies. So what this webinar is about is to try and flush out the solutions, discuss them between us, and then come up with some really good first steps for improving the situation. Before we go on to the first couple of presentations, I was going to give you a quick update from the data sharing group from water companies. It's been recognised for a number of years. Claire DC has been sort of prodding me for at least 2 years, maybe longer, to try and improve the situation with respect to data sharing. And this year it's really had a bit of emphasis added into it. They've had a few meetings, and they've agreed that they really want to make sure that water companies are sharing data that's appropriate to maximise partnership working. They recognise it's particularly important in urban environments. That's absolutely true, and they also recognise that, you know, it's pretty patchy. Some water companies are really good at it, some less good. Data sharing is much better on the water side of their business than on the foul side. It's a lot more contentious, I think, with the drainage side of things. And so, you know, they're really, we've got a group now. It's really keen to move it forward, and I think the discussions that we're going to have after the presentations today can really help give this a bit of energy this year and move something that we've been wanting to move forward for a while. So with that said, I think we'll go on to the first two talks. They've both been recorded to try and make it a bit smoother. First one's from Lucy, and that's about the data that's already in the CaBA data package, and the second one's from me, which is about case studies that I've been involved in. And then we're going to move from that recording into the discussion session, where I'll start with a couple of case studies from other people. Nick Paling and John Sanders have sent in some great examples, and then we'll go into the discussion from there. Okay, Lucy.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the water industry data that's already available within the CaBA data package. So the CaBA data package has been developed by the CaBA mentoring and technical support team, together with support from other people who know each data set well. I'm going to start by talking about data related to the raw water, drinking water side of the water industry, and then move on to data sets from the sewage side of the industry. So starting with abstraction, the data package includes data on the location of abstraction licenses and how much flow each abstraction is licensed to take in megalitres per day and per year. What we don't know are the recent actual abstractions. We know the sector that's abstracting, and we know whether it's a surface water or groundwater abstraction. We know what the water's being used for as well. This layer has been available in the desktop data package for a number of years now, but following discussions with the Environment Agency, we've recently published it online, so you can now pull it into your catchment portals and story maps. We also have data on the catchments that feed raw water into each abstraction. For groundwater, we have source protection zones, and the zones show the risk of contamination from any activities that might cause pollution. There are three main zones: the inner, outer and total catchment, which are defined by travel time to the source, and the closer the polluting activity is to the source, the greater the risk. So any work which catchment partnerships could deliver to improve the water quality or the amount of groundwater recharge within a source protection zone could be of interest to a water company, because it could potentially make the water resources more sustainable. For surface water, there's drinking water protected areas, which you can access through the Magic website. We haven't actually included these in the data package itself. They actually just highlight the WFD water body in which the abstraction sits, not the whole of the catchment draining to it. And for both surface water and groundwater, we have the safeguard zones, which highlight where water quality is at risk of deterioration, where water companies may need additional treatment in the future. And these zones highlight areas where land use is causing pollution of the raw water, for example from pesticides, nitrates and other pollutants. So these layers could be really helpful to identify opportunities where a catchment-based approach to tackle some of these issues could help protect drinking water. If you're interested in water resources, then abstraction's just part of the picture. You also need to consider where water is returned to the environment through discharges, and this mainly from sewage treatment works. So in the data package, you can also access the consented discharge layer from the Environment Agency. When we started working with CaBA partnerships on water resources a few years ago, there was a temptation just to focus on the size of abstractions. But what actually matters is how consumptive each abstraction is. So what do we mean by that? Well, it's the difference between the amount of water taken out of the river and what's put back in. So if you imagine if you take water out and return it in the same place, there's little impact on the water resources, but if you take it out and return it somewhere else further downstream or in another catchment, then you could be having a greater impact on those water resources. So this leads us on nicely to the catchment abstraction management strategies developed by the Environment Agency. It's quite an old piece of work now, but it's still helpful in terms of looking at the overall water balance in each catchment. For each water body, an ecological flow indicator is calculated, and this is the amount of water that the river habitat and species need. Anything that causes the flow to fall below this level can have a negative impact on habitat and species. The difference between the natural flow and the ecological flow indicator is the flow that's available for abstraction. Whilst the modelling within CAMS is fairly complex, the output maps included in the data package are relatively easy to use and understand. Red areas highlight catchments that are over-abstracted, yellow are areas that are over-licensed, and green show areas where there is water available for abstraction. So as an example, the map on the screen shows the Wyre catchment in the northwest of England at the Q95 low flow, and as you can see at this flow, quite a large part of the catchment is over abstracted. Okay, so if we switch to a view for the Q30 flow, you can see that more water is available, and this is the normal situation that we'd expect to see. But when we first released this data, we had questions from a number of partnerships about situations where it appeared that there was less water available at high flows than at low flows, which at first seems illogical. But the reason for this is that in some particularly urbanised catchments, the low flow is being artificially boosted by lots of discharges from sewage treatment works. So the Q95 is actually higher than it would be under natural conditions. We understand that there's some new environmental data available from the Environment Agency on water resources that was presented at a webinar a few months ago, and as soon as we know more, we'll aim to share that with people. If you're particularly interested in water resources, we held a more detailed webinar on this topic back in May with CH, and you can watch that back via the Rivers Trust YouTube channel. Okay, so moving on to the sewage side of the water industry and water quality issues now. The data package includes source apportionment modelling data from both the SgZs and Separate models. And the source apportionment pie charts can provide a useful resource to help identify the sector where interventions to tackle nutrient pollution will make the most difference. And this can be helpful to ensure that the work we're doing is targeted to make the most difference to water quality. Because there's two models, comparing the source apportionment from both is helpful. If they both say the same thing, then we can be more confident about sources. If the predictions are very different, then there's a higher level of uncertainty over the source of pollution. We also have outputs in the data package from the SGZs model that can help identify catchments where changes in land management practice could reduce losses of phosphorus and achieve good status. And this can offer opportunities for working with water companies on things like phosphate offsetting. In terms of identifying discharges from water companies, the consented discharge layer includes all discharges which the Environment Agency regulates. And there's a large amount of information about each discharge in the attribute table, and the data can be visualised by effluent or outlet type. One particular discharge type of interest to CaBA partnerships are combined sewer or storm overflows. Whilst these are designed to discharge during very wet periods when dilution of the river is significant enough to avoid impacts, it's not uncommon for this type of discharge to malfunction, for example due to blockages or capacity issues, which means they can cause pollution, especially if this happens during low flow periods. So the consented discharge layer can show us where CSOs are, and then in addition we've recently gained access to data on CSO spill frequency and duration for 2019. This data was obtained by a Freedom of Information request to water companies from The Guardian, and the data were matched to the Environment Agency's consented discharge layer to obtain locations of the discharges. We've used the data in the Rivers Fit to Play in map, which you might have seen recently, which aims to provide recreational river users with the best available information on potential health risks. The layer only includes data from CSOs which have event duration monitoring installed and where we could be confident that we were matching the data to the correct CSO. You can access this data now via the online CaBA data package. So where are water companies taking action? In version 5 of the data package released last year, we've added data from the Water Industry National Environment Programme from the WINUP, and the measures in the WINUP represent the investments required by water companies to meet their environmental obligations. It's a fairly complex data set and not that easy to interpret, but with the help of Claire Deasy from Northumbria Water, we've picked out and visualised those attributes which we think will be of most use to CaBA partnerships. So for example, the layers you can see on this map show where actions are planned, and they're symbolised to show why measures are required. In other words, they're symbolised by the regulatory driver. The WINUP data can be used to show where water companies are planning to investigate CSOs which spill too frequently. So we've also produced some layers where we've filtered out measures with a core obligation to meet the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive and to show what sort of action is planned there during the next asset management plan cycle. Monitoring is usually the first stage in identifying frequently spilling intermittent discharges, and any which spill over 40 times a year should then trigger an investigation. So these sites represent an opportunity for CaBA partners to contribute evidence about the environmental impact and amenity value of the river that's affected by the spills, and also potentially to align green infrastructure, SUDS or NFM projects that could provide multiple benefits in these areas. The full WinUp dataset is included in the data package if you want to look at more of the details, but as I said, it is a fairly complex dataset and not that easy to interpret, so we'd recommend looking at it in partnership with water company partners. So that was a quick introduction to water industry data available in the CaBA data package. If you want to find out more, you can go to our open data site at data.catchmentbasedapproach.org.
This presentation follows on from Lucy's about the standard data that's in the CaBA data package. The data I'm going to talk about is identified in the user guide as local data. The idea of this presentation is to explain about the data that's been made available locally by water companies so that we can share best practice around the country. If one water company shared this data with their CaBA partnership, perhaps your water company could too. This is potentially the ideal partnership dataset shared by a water company with its CaBA partnership. It has 9 types of partnership working within it, and I'll go through each one to show how they could be used. The first type of areas are where runoff needs to be reduced. This could be either to reduce spill frequencies at a CSO or to reduce localised sewer flooding. The water company has identified in some detail the catchment to the target area and then identified the mitigation that partnerships could receive funding to deliver. For this location, SUDS and community wetlands could be suggested. The second type of partnership working is to improve water quality. This is just a detailed safeguard zone along with the water quality issue that is causing the problem, in this case, a specific pesticide. It is worth noting that water companies do update and improve on the safeguard zones published by the EA. In the CaBA data package, we provide the most up-to-date safeguard zones. However, in one catchment where I worked recently, I used the more detailed safeguard zones developed by the water company. The combination of spatial data and information about the active ingredient that is causing the problem has the potential to maximise the effectiveness of partnership delivery. The next type of partnership delivery relates to water quality issues, where the water company is interested in offsetting its own discharges from sewage treatment works by changes in catchment management. This typically happens in subcatchments with high phosphorus, where the water company input is from small rural treatment works, where additional treatment would be extremely expensive. This means that the most cost-effective solution is to invest money in catchment management, which will reduce the phosphorus concentration in the river and bring other benefits as well. FarmScoper can be used to identify the most cost-effective mitigation measures given the farming system and the type of soil in the area highlighted. Missed connections can be an issue in separate sewerage systems, whereby the foul system is accidentally connected to the stormwater system. In this case, the water company has identified the area which has a separate system and where the monitoring has picked up an issue. Engagement work, including education, can be targeted in this area, and the link between the observed water quality and poor local practice can be used to show the community what is causing the problem. Behavioural change. This zone highlights the areas with specific issues that are causing problems. In other parts of the country, this could be related to water usage, causing issues with available resources.
Demand management mitigation, including education, could be used to reduce the problem. In this case, the issue is unflushables, so education and monitoring are potentially the most effective community responses. Recreational benefits. This is where water company investment has delivered or will deliver a step change in water quality or quantity, which could provide significant recreational improvement if it's combined with partnership working. Projects which improve access to the river with better footpaths or create improved recreational areas will all allow communities to benefit from the significant engineering works that have occurred in the area and have led to the step change in water quality. Low flow areas caused in part by abstraction can be potentially improved by targeted river restoration. The aim of this type of partnership work is to improve the resilience of the ecology to low flows by creating a more natural river morphology with refuges and low flow channels. This type of mitigation should be used in combination with demand management or leakage reduction rather than just to support over abstraction. And finally, barriers to fish migration, carbon offsetting and biodiversity net gain can all be associated with water company assets and land holdings, and opportunities for each of these could be included on this map. Basically, this map is a water company version of the reasons for not achieving good published by the Environment Agency. But it has much tighter spatial focus and a clear identification of the contribution that partnerships could help provide. This type of data could be updated for each AMP cycle and shared openly with the partnership and wider community. As projects are delivered, the partnership layer could be updated and monitoring data from the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative used to show whether the projects have delivered the expected benefits. There's no sensitive information in this dataset, but it would require water companies to generate and update it. In reality, most of the data that's been shared by water companies with CaBA partnerships so far is much more detailed and sensitive. This makes it less easy to use well than the idealised dataset that I've just been through. This first example of real data is hydraulic capacity modelling output that was given to us by one water company. The coloured areas show drainage areas which have capacity issues. We use this data to identify upstream areas where blue-green infrastructure could reduce peak flows in the drainage system. However, we had to estimate what the upstream catchment was, and this is far from easy. In our case, this information was coupled with the communities at risk and some surface water modelling, providing a reasonable evidence base for targeting measures. The sensitivity here was that water companies did not want to identify specific locations which suffer from flooding. The modelling output was far less sensitive than the actual known locations of sewer flooding, which the water company did not want to share with us. It is great when we have this sort of data shared with us. In this case, we got the whole asset database. This allows us to really understand the urban hydrology and see where all the engineered features are and how the system actually works. This is the urban equivalent to the characterization data that we have in the CaBA data package for the rural part of the catchment. The only problem with this data is that water companies are quite sensitive about it and therefore reluctant to share it. One water company recently also pointed out to me that they sell this information to developers and service providers, and so they are not keen to lose this income stream. It is also the case that you really need some engineering knowledge, preferably from the water company, to make proper use of this data. This simplified version of the asset database is good for targeting missed connection campaigns, as it allows us to see where the separate system is. On this map, the separate system is highlighted, is all the blue pipes, and the combined system is the brown pipes. It's pretty easy to use and does not have the detail from the previous example. I know that a number of water companies have provided this sort of data to partnerships, including in Merseyside. Sewer sheds are drainage catchments which flow to a specific point. Once you have the sewer shed, you know where to work to solve a specific problem. These have been used in Hillingdon to target improvements to surface water drainage and reduce flooding. In another case, they were used to identify the catchment to a CSO. This will potentially allow the partnership to spatially target its delivery in urban areas. We've tried a couple of different ways to develop sewer sheds from data provided by water companies. Firstly, we used the full asset database with a short bit of computer code to automatically draw the upstream catchment to a point. This worked okay, but was not that reliable and required skills that few of us, including me, have. Next, we used a local drainage engineer to do it by eye based on their knowledge of the system, and this was a lot quicker and more reliable. All this work showed me just how different sewer sheds are from the topography and that we will need additional expertise if we're to generate this data ourselves. This map shows safeguard zones in green and red. The red ones have been prioritised by the water company for catchment work. Quite a few water companies do this, and it's really useful. Generally, they review all their safeguard zones and identify the ones where catchment management could be most cost effective. I'm aware of this data in at least 2 water companies. They provide the prioritisation to partnerships along with modelling and data analysis work, which really helps to identify the most cost-effective mitigation measures to be chosen. In one case, they broke the safeguard zone down into sections to identify the most sensitive locations within the zone, so that field-scale mitigation could be planned. SUDS. There are some fantastic surface water management plan model outputs that are available and can be used by partnerships. In this case, the output can be interrogated to see the flow paths around the urban environment and, critically, the hydrograph of flow during an event. This data could allow partnerships to really quantify how much SUDS delivery is required and where it should be located. Using this data is difficult, so my feeling is that partnerships should work with specialist consultancies to help them use it effectively. This work was done by a company called Eden Vale Young. I think that Thames 21 have done something similar, and hopefully John is on the webinar and we can ask him questions about it a bit later. This is modelling output again, and really shows me that we need to work with modellers if we're to make the best use of this amazing data resource. This first slide shows the surface water modelling similar to SciMap and shows where the water accumulates. The second version shows InfoWorks modelling, which incorporates pipe flow. In the first slide, we might put the wetland in location A, but once we understand the urban hydrology, we're much more likely to put it in location B. In summary, water companies are already sharing significant and in some cases very detailed information with partnerships. However, there's a real barrier in terms of the licensing of this data and our technical capacity to use it. It would be good to discuss whether the partnerships on this webinar think that a water industry version of the RF-NAGS data, which clearly communicates where water companies wish to work in partnership and the sort of mitigations that will work best, would be a good first step. This type of data could be freely shared and updated. A secondary issue is how, or even if, partnerships should attempt to use the more detailed data that is available. This detailed asset and modelling data is the urban equivalent of the rural data in the CaBA data package, but needs quite detailed technical knowledge to use it well. Should partnerships be working with specialists to make appropriate use of this data too? If you have experience of this, it would be good to share this in the discussion after this presentation. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to include another couple of slides from Nick Paling and from John Saunders as well, just as we go into the discussion. So these are a couple more examples. Nick and John, please jump in if I get anything wrong. So in this first example, it looks like the water company has shared information about how the system, this is a drinking water system, is working, so that the partnership can understand the relative contribution of a couple of different sources to the source, drinking water source. And they share information on costings, looks like. And then, so that enables the partnership to understand how the system works from the water company's point of view. And then the data that comes back from the partnership is monitoring data. This is all to do with pesticides. So now that the partnership understands how the system works and can start thinking about how to balance those two different sources of water, they can design a monitoring strategy and use that to feed data back into the water company. That's what I think this example is. And then from the Mersey Rivers Trust, this is an example of where the water company shared really detailed data of where the issues are as far as they're concerned, and gives all the point data and some information about what's causing the problem, so that the partnership can really focus in on the issue. And the only thing that's missing here is those sewer shed definitions to help work out what catchment is feeding into a particularly troublesome CSO. This is the misconnection data that I was talking about in my presentation. So it's yeah, pretty easy to use if you're targeting a misconnection campaign. And then this is final one from John, I think is absolutely excellent, which is where United Utilities share their asset data in terms of their Safe Dig app. This would be absolutely brilliant if we could get water companies willing to share this information, because you're then in a position to know where the pipework is and a bit more information about it. So I think that that would be a great first step. And really start the discussion, I guess. So I thought we'd start with if anyone has got any questions. I've seen a few coming into the chat, so Lucy, if you could kind of let me know if there's anything coming into the chat or the Q&A, and then we'll, if all the panel switch their videos on, then we can answer any questions and then kind of work through what we think a good next step would be for us in terms of data sharing in both directions.
So there's a question in the chat, Dave, from Mark Summers, asking about SUDS, which I think the attendees won't be able to see because it's just to the panelists, so you might want to read it out.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Does there need to be something that helps distinguish managed SUDS as opposed to SUDS that need maintenance intervention? My understanding is developers walking away is a real problem for local authorities. So does anyone, I'm looking at Peter Blythe, do we know if this is an issue, and has there been any progress on it? My understanding was that there wasn't, when the SUDS guidance was released, there isn't any particular guidance about adoption, but you probably know better than me. Peter, you need to turn on your mic. That's it.
This has been a problem for years, basically ever since people started seriously using SUDS. The only real answer is to get decent adoption arrangements in place and make sure that the long-term management is part of the whole agreement for doing the SUDS. It was a real issue that Section 3 of the Floods and Water Management Act wasn't implemented, so we weren't able to make the adoption as a mandatory part of the process. But there's a lot of work going on adoption, and I think it's a matter really of education of people who are, of developers and the people who are buying the development, if you like, to make sure that those sort of management arrangements, those long-term management arrangements are put in place when the SUD is designed and built. So I think that's really the only way forward at the moment. But it has always been one of the really big issues with SUDS, and there's some horrible examples of where it's gone wrong. There's the M11 where nobody thought about it, and it cost them a fortune to get access to clear out the SUDS for the motorway drainage, because nobody had thought about it. They realised that it needed to be dug out occasionally, but nobody had thought about how you did it. They couldn't do it from the motorway. They had to do it across farmland, which involved farmers basically held them to ransom, just because nobody had thought about it.
Right. Okay. So it's still an ongoing issue, basically.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. That's disappointing, but I thought that might be the answer. I was going to ask John actually, and then Nick, just to fill us in on anything else they wanted to say about their particular examples that they found was really positive, or suggestions for where what additional data they would like from their water companies. John?
Yes, I think the key point to make really is that partnership working is key to this. And the examples you've shown for United Utilities there, both your presentation and the latter slides, was very much around making sure that the water company was fully involved in the discussions and with the data sharing. And I think the risk is we would be data rich and information poor. And so having that ability to work in partnership with the water company to get their understanding and the information and translating the data into real information we can then use to plan interventions and solutions is really the key. I think just handing over data, as you said earlier, Dave, can be a challenge, because you either need the expertise or you need to understand the context around the data sets themselves. So having that input from the water company and their expertise has been really powerful in working together in partnership with United Utilities.
And do you think that the sort of data set that I kind of mocked up, I mean, you can tell it's me who's mocked it up because visually it wasn't very appealing, but it was, that sort of data basically tries to encapsulate the water industry understanding of their own data set, like misconnections, but then just give you the catchment and say, the problem's misconnections. This is, this is the data that, the monitoring we've had that says this issue. Is that kind of, that combination of an area and then that understanding, which all comes from the agencies, from the water company's understanding of their own system, would that be a good halfway house that would help partnerships use this very complicated data potentially?
Yeah, I think so, Dode. I think I think the key is really for the urban environment is getting the water company working in partnership with the local authorities, other drainage authorities, and the third sector. And that example you showed of the CaBA workshop we held just back in February for the Irwell was really powerful in getting all the relevant parties together through the CaBA partnership to look at the urban issues and then to understand, using data provided by the water company and by the local authorities as well, where to target effort and where we need to start working collaboratively to solve some of the problems identified.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, John. Nick, how about your experience? Yours was quite a different example there of a clean water system and monitoring. So,
yeah, I think what I was trying to illustrate with those slides was we're still trying to work out how we offer value. How do we offer value to the water company? What's in it for them of working with us, sharing data and information with us? And in simple terms, we're trying to work out how what we do helps them so that we can articulate that to them, essentially showcasing how we add value to what they're trying to do as a water company. And it's not easy to do because obviously they're a water company and they're huge, and we're catchment partnerships and rivers trusts and other local groups, scratching around trying to show that what we do does have significant value. And so the cost of treatment and the way that the drinking water treatment process is undertaken and the way that costs are incurred by the water company, that's us trying to understand how what we do, catchment management, for example, connects into that. How are we making it more resilient? Are we saving money? What's the narrative that we're trying to develop in terms of convincing the water company to invest in what we do? And so we were very lucky to be able to access that data on not only where the drinking raw waters are coming from, but also the monitoring work that they do to assess the condition, the quality of the raw water that they're treating, and the costs that are incurred in treating it. That gave us a really privileged opportunity to be able to sort of plug what we do into that process. Catchment management potentially could make that process more resilient. It potentially could save them money in that process. And now we have a bit of an insight into how, and so we can essentially market what we do across the water company. The final slide was showing the pesticide sum. Yeah, go on, Dave.
Why did they share that data with you? Because basically that data starts to help you understand how their system works, both economically and physically. So why did they share that data with you?
So we are again fortunate to be in a position where we have a large partnership / collaborative project, Upstream Thinking, which many of the CaBA organisations in the Southwest are also partners in that project. And so it's actually the work that we're doing in partnership with the water company that allowed us to collaborate with them on some work to try and set data directly with the Catchment Partnership. No, they shared it with members of the Catchment Partnership under the auspices of a partnership project. And Upstream Thinking is very much part of catchment-based approach. It's always been the case that the two sit very closely together. So that's why they shared it with us, because they saw the potential value in us working with them to develop that narrative. So it's very hit on sort of the crux of the issue really, which is what we're saying to the water company: share your information with us. We want to exchange information with you, and they're kind of looking at us and saying, "Who are you? Who's asking? Is it Tamar Catchment Partnership, for example, them to know who to share data with or who they're sharing it with, and in a risk averse, in a controlled way, so that they can control that information and that data."
I'm not sure whether anybody else is suffering from breakup here. Yeah, there's quite a few nods. So Nick, much as I hate to do this to you, could you switch your camera off? Let's give it a go and see if that helps. And we'll go on to Claire next, I think. So, Claire, I mean, you know, I think we've seen quite a few examples of really quite complicated data being shared with partnerships. I've got my suggestion of that kind of much more simplified data set, which would possibly overcome some of the issues. Do you think that could be a way to go, or what's your kind of feeling, and the feeling of, you know, you're representing all water companies here? So.
Yeah, hi everyone. So there are other water companies on the call as well. So
oh, good. Okay, cool.
Anyone wants to type in any comments, please do feel free, because although I'm representing all water companies, I'm only in one, and we're all very different. So water companies have had a number of discussions. So representatives from all water companies have been talking about data sharing among ourselves as well. So we have been gathering information. Obviously, as Dave picked on in his introduction, we are keen not to be blockers in this area, and to help with catchment management, integrated catchment management, through sharing information with our partners and using that to help us work in partnership. It is really important to us, but obviously we are very big organisations and we are very different, both in our catchments and the way our companies work, and the way we're managed and the way we engage with our partners. So it is difficult to get that consistency. I really appreciate what Dave and Michelle have been trying to do in terms of pulling information into the data package, so representing at sort of national industry level what we've been able to pull in and contribute. And I know that you access some of that through freedom of information. I think in the future we would want to be putting that out openly by sharing that with you, not having those freedom of information requests. You know, we are trying to work in partnership. So I think the other thing is that if you access stuff through FOI, you don't necessarily get the context behind that. So I think the spill frequencies information is something particularly that actually you need someone to really interpret that, and explain why certain things are happening and why that's there. And I think there's that kind of local interpretation which we need to try and get into the data package somehow, and that comes through us working locally at partnership level. I think Nick made a really good point, and we've talked about it before, about what companies are able to share and how they can share, and how we do that and who they're sharing with, and this idea of it being based around projects. So obviously we're sort of talking at two different levels here. There's a sort of strategic level, what can we put in the data package as an industry? And then at the other level, what data do we need to share and what would be useful to help us progress those catchment projects and work on those local issues? I think that there's a place for both of those things. And it also struck me that when Dave was talking, that probably there's more of an opportunity for each company to work with the Rivers Trust to help access those data sets and interpret them for their partnerships, rather than the sharing going directly to the local partnership. I'm thinking that actually that might be something which would be easier for us to manage. So I'd welcome, you know, other people's perspectives on that, both for other companies but also from the Rivers Trust. I just made a few notes there thinking about, you know, I could see that we could have a conversation for Northumbrian Water with the Rivers Trust about information that would be useful and how we could present the sort of information that would help us address our issues in the Northeast with our partners, and then create a sort of local sharing discussion potentially, where we would talk about things that might be useful, and that would then be customized for us in our region. It would be very different for Nick in his and John in his again, and for other companies. I think we could go down that local approach as well as what we're doing with the data package. Yeah,
I'm going to pick you up on one thing, Claire. It's you'd be working with the CaBA technical team, not the Rivers Trust. It's really important. We're representing CaBA, not RT. And I'd be really keen, certainly, to try and develop, you know, a real version of the kind of the data set that I showed in my talk, with Northumbrian Water, Yorkshire Water, any water company that wants to kind of develop one, and then we'll end up with a sort of, you know, at least as kind of a generic template of a data set that a number of water companies could go, well, okay, I quite like these bits of it, but I'm going to add these bits in for ourselves. I think that might might smooth the journey, and we could do that negotiation once centrally and then send the data out. What I don't want to do is for the CaBA technical team to come between the local giving of data on a project level basis, because I think that's really important. So the sort of stuff that Nick was talking about. I wanted to pick up a second point with you as well, so and pass it on to Michelle, in terms of the CSO spill data, which we got from a Freedom of Information request, and what's happening with that now, Michelle, and how's that kind of moving forward, because we're not, well, you tell the story.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Yeah, we had a meeting just in the last week, actually, with the water company to talk about how we can get more frequent updates to that information and to make sure it's as accurate as possible, because there have been, I know a lot of the monitoring, the EDM monitoring, because it's new, there are issues with it, and some of the data that we put on the map, they're flagging that some of the equipment is faulty or it's not registering the right data. So we've now agreed a way that we can actually flag that within the current data set, and starting to explore how we can get more frequent updates, probably twice a year at the time that the data is actually sent to the Environment Agency. So we'd be really open to exploring that with other water companies if you'd like to get in touch, and we can start to look at how we can incorporate more frequent updates so the data is as accurate as possible, really, and that we're not misrepresenting anything, and that we can get more timely updates in there, but also as Lucy mentioned in her presentation, some of the issues are around trying to spatially locate the data and match it to the existing locations that we've got from the consented discharge data. So we're really, we would encourage you guys to contact us, and sort of we can start to work together really to make sure that that data set is updated as frequently as possible and that it's as accurate as possible. And if you know of any issues with particular locations and the monitoring equipment, as I say, we've now got a mechanism to flag that on the pop-ups in the map. So obviously we will have a limit to how many of those we can handle if you're going to send thousands of them, but get in touch in the first instance and we will start to explore that with you.
Claire, does that sound like I mean, we've started off with a, frankly, it's a non-partnership approach with our first map, and we kind of knew that that's what we were doing, and me and Michelle were a bit kind of nervous about it because it's not our normal way of doing things, but we're now moving into a much more partnership way of sharing data and making sure it's the right data. Does that sound more comfortable or more positive?
So Northumbrian Water shared spill frequency data with our partners in quite a different way a couple of years ago. So we created internal maps of our areas, and then we highlighted all of the CSOs that were frequent spillers. We created an internal version of the map that had spill frequencies in bands, but at that time the discussion was that we didn't want to share that information with our partners, so we were just highlighting the CSOs where there was an issue. We were comfortable to do that. We weren't comfortable with sharing the number of times they spilled, partly because of the uncertainties around that and all those complexities that you've hinted at. But obviously that information, we're 2 years on from that. It's now out there as freedom of information, but it's about how we present that, and maybe we could think about putting it in bands as well that would then, because actually it is quite overwhelming when you come in and you see the number of hours that they spill. That's not the way that we present information to our partners. We tend to talk in different ways about that, so I think we could have a conversation as an industry about how we present some of those data sets that potentially are more sensitive. And I think what we're trying to do is highlight between us where we think we need to put focus. And if those CSOs are presenting a sort of chronic water quality issue in certain catchments, well, we're obviously doing what we're doing within the industry, looking at the storm overflows assessment framework, trying to reduce those spill frequencies. If the things partners can do, then yes, absolutely, we need partners to be coming to us and saying, look, we have an idea. So trying to put the information out in the right way so that partners can come to us is the aim of that. It's not about just trying to show where our CSOs spill really frequently and getting everyone on the bandwagon about how big an issue it is.
Okay. There's a question just come in for you from Annika France, Claire. Do you want me to read it out, or can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah. How often and when do water companies report EDM data with the Environment Agency? I think it's annual, Annika. So I think we report it annually. And the bands and the categorization. So yeah, and there's quite a lot of documentation from the Environment Agency about this, but I think what would probably be really useful is for someone from that CaBA data services team, if that's the right number, right name, to have a conversation with an expert from within the industry, whether that's from Northumbria Water or from another company, about this, and see if we can come across or develop a common way of presenting that, which is helpful to everyone.
Okay. Do you think that's the sort of thing that the working group could take on, Claire? Do you think that's a good idea, Michelle and Claire?
So I'm just thinking, in terms of the data sharing group that we've currently got going, we probably don't have the right expert in that group, so it would be something to pass on as an action, I think. It's probably something we could coordinate. So.
All right.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to pick this up with you afterwards, Claire, and we can maybe start the ball rolling. As I say, we've been in touch with a couple of other water companies about this already, and getting hold of the right person is essential, as you say, someone who sort of understands EDM data.
We've got a couple of comments coming in from water companies. So we've got Wessex Water has a live website, Coastwatch, where that information comes in, and Thames Water is annual, same for South West Water. So we've got a picture there of, it looks like it, yeah, it's obviously annual. Now,
just to say, Dave, can I just jump in on that? The Wessex Water site is great because it's got the sort of live spill information, and it's the same with the Surfers Against Sewage Safer Seas service as well. We would love to see that for rivers as well as coastal sites. So if there are any water companies interested in getting involved with that, so we are looking now to identify recreation hotspots on rivers where live warnings of spills. I think the first site has gone in there, which is Welsh Water on the Dee at Chester. So we have obviously a number of people coming to us now that we've published the map, asking for live information rather than just a sort of annual. As you say, Claire, it doesn't tell you that much if you just know the number of hours. What people who are using rivers really want is actually live information to tell them about the risk when they're actually in the water.
Okay, well, I'm conscious of time, and I want to launch the kind of the feedback survey, which is kind of aimed at this discussion and trying to get get ideas or the views of most of the people on the call. So I think it'll come up live on your screen. It's quite intuitive to use, isn't it, Lucy? And if you have problems with it, then please tell us in the chat, because yesterday we used a system and it worked fine for most people, but not for others. So if you have problems, look on the chat, and then there'll be a link put in there for you to fill in. Okay, so the first one, we're just trying to find out who we've got on the call. I think, Lucy, tell me if I'm wrong here, that this allows us to see what the views are of different sectors. So not individually, but by sector. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. We just wanted to sort of be able to capture where the different views were, if there were significant differences.
Okay, grand. All right, if you've all completed that, that's grand, and we'll close that one. Okay, grand. Okay, that's good that we've got a good selection of water companies, as well as catchment partnerships and regulators, and consultancy as well. And it looks probably like individuals from research institutes and other. So that's grand. That's a good first starter, just to help us interpret the results. So should we go on to the second one? Now, Lucy, this is in two parts, isn't it? Is that right?
It is. on the interactive poll, we could only have up to 10 answers on each. So the first question's relating to people that are in the south of the country, and then we've got the same question coming next for people in the north, east and Wales.
So lots of Thames water and South West water. Okay, well, that's good. We've got a good, yeah, we've got someone from everywhere on there. And we've got a don't know as well, which is good. Just justifies us having it. Right, should we do the northern one? Is Hafren, that's not Welsh water, is it? Do you see? Is that a small water company in Wales? Oh.
It's what was Dee Valley Water plus the old Severn Trent White Welsh area.
Okay, all right. Well, that's less surprising then that we haven't got anyone in that one. We've got a good spread of water companies anyway, which is really useful. Right. Which issues would your catchment partnership be keen to collaborate on with your local water company? So are we aiming this just at catchment hosts, and Lucy, or should we?
No, I think if you're a host, but also if you're a member of a catchment partnership, and then equally if you're from a water company, which issues you'd be keen to collaborate on with CaBA?
Okay, so it's all those things, and we've asked for the top 3 kind of priorities, just to give us a feel for the things that, if you are putting in other, could you type into the comment what other means, so that we've got a record of it, please? That'd be really useful. Okay, now there's a big, two big ones there. Now the first one on citizen science monitoring, I'm tempted to do a mini fist pump on that, but I probably won't. I mean, I think it's really important. Michelle has got a consultation out at the moment about the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative. Michelle, I'm just going to ask you just to give a quick explanation.
Yeah, I was just going to post, I will post the link in the chat shortly, but as Dave said, we are developing plans at the moment for a national catchment monitoring cooperative, where we would, sorry, I'm just going to shut the door, where we would be looking to coordinate and really sort of up our game in terms of what data and evidence we can collect at a local level. Thanks, Annika, she's just posted the link to the consultation hub in the chat. We're really seeking views from everybody at the moment, so local catchment partnerships, water companies. We've had about 60 responses so far. The consultation's open till the end of August, and our plan at the moment, we are liaising with water companies. We've got support from a good number of them to put a bid together to the Ofwat Innovation Fund, and if you would be interested in discussing that with us, we're working with Amina Boubacar from United Utilities, who's on secondment with us at the moment, and Amina and I are pulling together a bid later this year, and it's really looking at obviously filling knowledge gaps, but also some of the other benefits in terms of social and well-being benefits that can come. And I know a lot of water companies now are looking at this in terms of their CMEX scores. So please do come talk to us if you're interested, if you haven't already engaged with us. Amina and I would love to talk to you about it. But also please do fill in the consultation survey.
Grand. Okay, thanks very much, Michelle. And then there's obviously the second biggest one is the catchment phosphate management. If you have a view on how you could share that information in a way that allows catchment partnerships to really engage with the offsetting discussion, both in terms of telling them where that opportunity is, and then the partnerships then providing information back potentially in terms of monitoring, that would be great. And if you can stick that in the chat, I'd really appreciate it. I mean, in the CaBA data package, what we've done so far to try and home in on that offsetting opportunity is we've taken the SGZs fair share data and processed it so that we've identified catchments where catchment management has some chance of delivering the WFD objectives. That's all we've done so far. So very simplistic. We've basically said it has to be a catchment that's got a reasonable contribution from rural versus urban, and it also can't be failing by a huge amount, because if it was, then you're not going to achieve the standard. So that's how we've done it at the moment. But of course, water companies have done much more sophisticated targeting of catchments. And what would be absolutely great is if catchment partnerships had a layer which said all these subcatchments are ones that we believe as a water company there's an offsetting opportunity. That would be great. So if you've got any comments from a water company point of view or a host point of view about phosphorus, phosphate, and what your suggestions are, that would be great. Okay, I think we've got one more question. Is it?
We've got a few more.
Oh, a few more. Okay, excellent. Yes, sorry. This is to try and find out, have you received any of these data sets from your local water company? And yeah, just select all that apply. Asset locations, that can be either a full asset database or sort of a processed one like the one that John Sanders showed us from Mersey. Okay, I'm going to do the opposite this time. I'm very excited about some of the small bars here. Sewer sheds and drainage catchments. I'd love to know, please let us know in the chat, ones that, if examples of that. That's, for me, in terms of understanding urban hydrology, I think it's so important. So yeah, if there's any examples, please put them in the chat so we know about them. And the other one is recent actual abstractions. That's hugely exciting as well. Something that we want to be able to share, particularly to inform abstraction trading. So again, if you've got examples, the agency's position on this at the moment is it's way too sensitive, and they're not willing to share it, even though they've got the data. It's been processed by Bristol University and CEH. So we know it's there, but we're really struggling to get hold of it, and it would really, really help us. Okay, I think that's really interesting. And if you, as I say, if you've got any comments on any of the other examples, and you can put that in the chat, then we'll have a record of, particularly if you're happy for us to get in contact with you, we can find out about those. Great. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Oh. And it's this one's same list of data, and now it's which ones do you think will be most useful? So it'll be a compare and contrast with compare what has been shared with what do you think would be really useful. And I realise I've broken the golden rule again. I got one slide ahead of myself, so if this was a rigorous scientific activity, it wouldn't be quite so good now that I've got overexcited about the sewer sheds and recent actuals. But brilliant. Okay, so ecological or water quality monitoring data, brilliant. That's really helpful. Again, if you've got a reason, if you can see an opportunity there, something positive that could really make a difference, that would be great. Actually, if you could tell us about that. I think we're getting some brilliant information here for the working group and for ourselves. So it's going to take a bit of time to go through it, but thank you. This data is really useful, in the chat that's going on the right hand side. I can't keep up with it, but that looks really useful as well. Have you shared any of the following data with water companies? Okay, so this is coming back from the Catchment partnership towards water companies. Again, if you are a water company and you've received the data, then please put that in there. Okay, that's pretty much what I would anticipate. Again, really useful if you give us examples of what you've shared, and also I think even, well, as useful if you're a water company who's received it. Has it been useful? Has it helped you in terms of your decision-making process, or was it, you know, just not up to scratch? I mean, the whole idea behind the catchment monitoring cooperative is to make the data that we're sharing back with you as good as humanly possible, and as usable and as powerful for decision-making process as possible. So it's really useful for us to know, you know, good, bad, or indifferent from a water company's point of view, if that data you got it, didn't help you. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Now, one of the reasons why I've been picking on Nick today is because he told me when we were preparing for this to be positive, no negative stuff. So we've just got one question on blockers, which is this one. And if you identify any blockers, like my old boss used to say, you know, suggest a solution as well in the chat if you get a chance. So if you could identify the main blockers that you've found. Caught up a bit with some of the comments, and I think I put walkover data in terms of the types of data to be shared. Actually, it's a bit of an oversight, so that's useful. Thank you very much, Gina, for reminding me of that. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. We'd see commercial sensitivity. That's really what informed me sort of mocking up that kind of data set I showed this morning, because that's not commercially sensitive. There's nothing in there that could be back engineered to anything that's sensitive. So, you know, that's why I'd kind of come up with that. Let's see what else is important. Lack of technical resource or capability to analyse or use the data. Okay, that's the second most important. Yeah, and I think, you know, I think that's really come out really strongly from this webinar, that we need to be working in partnership with the water company. We can't interpret this data unless we're working with you, either on the simplified data that I'm kind of suggesting, or on the more complicated data where you really do need to sit down with the water company. I think, Michelle, you spent quite a while sat down with Claire Deasy, didn't you, on the WINEP data, because we just didn't know where to start, really.
Yeah, and it's definitely something we've built into the catchment monitoring cooperative plans as well, which is, you know, building that technical capacity locally to plan and manage collecting new data and identifying gaps in existing data. So that's part and parcel of where we want to go. It's building that technical capacity, and I think that's where the CaBA support team comes in, because we can do some of that sort of legwork and then produce the sort of summarised interpreted data sets that we can share with catchment partnerships as well.
Okay, grand, thank you, Michelle. Okay, let's go on to the last. So this is about what support catchment partnerships need. It leads on nicely from what Michelle was just talking about. At the moment, really, the support has been, you know, a webinar and the user guide. So every time I see an example of a new and potentially useful data set that some catchment partnership has got, we throw it into the user guide and we give a bit of an explanation about it. But it'd be really good to see what else, what other suggestions you've got here that we could do. Okay, greater knowledge of data sets available. When I could see that kind of developing as the main thing, I think I would like to suggest as a next step a webinar which is water company led, about the data sets that they have that could potentially be useful. I could see a way of doing this by working with our colleague Amina, who's recently come from a water company, and we could, you know, milk her for all her understanding, and then potentially bring in other water companies and come up with a list of data that's available, and that could really help partnerships know what to ask for. And I think probably the language is important as well. You know, what are the data sets called in different water companies? It's quite often
that's the first part of my discussion when I'm trying to get this data. Is I say I want data called X because that's what it was called in one water company. It's actually called something completely different in the next water company. So I think that could be a good first step. And then support to analyse the data. I think that's something that we should really think about with that working group as well. How are we going to get the support material together to really help people? Okay, that's brilliant, and you'll be happy to know one last question. Oh, fantastic. Okay. Right. I want to warn you that we know who you are and we have your email address, so that be very careful. That's good. So I'm glad that 96% of you are not careful. Brilliant. We will contact you. We'll also find out the person who said no. I bet it was Nick. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I have seen a comment from Mark Saul. Now, is Mark able to? Are we able to promote Mark as a panelist so that he can explain his comment about the EA or not, Lucy?
Yeah, I shall just find him.
Right.
Hello.
Oh, excellent.
I've just enabled him to talk, actually, so you should be.
Yeah, you don't want to see me. Let's not put everyone through that one.
Okay, Mark, explain your comment about the agency and what you're driving at there.
I think just thinking more widely and across different partners and across wider partnership, and recognising that except the focus of this session is on water company and CaBA data sharing and seeing that flow of information between those two elements, the agency, in role as regulator, catchment coordinator, and as holder of an awful lot of water quality evidence and data as well, I see as a key cog in this sort of data and evidence sharing piece as well. So it was just to recognise that there is a need to develop those opportunities to bring that EA data and information into these considerations as well, to complement that review of water company data and to help interpret those perhaps specific environmental impacts and as we start to identify catchment needs and opportunities to resolve those issues as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Mark. And I'm aware we've got 3 minutes to go, but there's a really good discussion come up. We've got Claire and Ben both saying the same thing in terms of we need to milk that understanding out of the water companies, but they're not really resourced to do it. They don't have the KPIs, some of them perhaps to work in partnership. So that is something that I'd very much like to think about how we can provide that through the CaBA technical support team. Now the CaBA technical support team is not just us, it's whoever is willing and able and resourced to provide the technical support. We write technical support into every one of our bids, and that's what gives us the time to spend on this. So it doesn't have to be us. I'd love it to be us, actually, because I'm really interested in this kind of information, and I see it as a really, a big next step in terms of improving data. So Claire, did you want to just have any final words, really, before we close down, about general observations about this webinar, and then and that point in specific point?
Yeah. I think it's been really useful this morning, so thanks to the CaBA data team for running it as part of the data user group plan. I think we've gathered quite a lot of information that's useful to help that data sharing group move it forwards, and obviously we do need support from the data group, I think, so it'd be good if the data group could take on the data sharing discussions and kind of work out how we can feed those actions through. I think the resource point is really important, because we can do what we like around supporting the data sharing and helping companies access things, but some partnerships are really struggling to do more than just get by and organise the hosting and submit those forms every year saying we've done this, we've done that. And water companies also, we're partnership working, we're trying to embed it in what we're doing and what's core to us as a business, but it is an evolving process, and some companies are further advanced than others. So there's always going to be those resource restrictions, and I think if there's some suggestions of ways that could be eased and that partnerships could get that support that they need people to dedicate time to this. And I think it's really back to Nick's point again about making the case for why we should be working on this and why the data sharing is really important. If you come to a company with a business case saying we need information and the benefits for you will be A, B, and C, and if we're struggling to do it, then ways to do that will be overcome. You know, we'll look for solutions, and there's other ways of pulling in support. So I think it's been really useful. Thanks very much, everyone, and also thanks for the surveys. Thanks to you, Dave and Lucy, for managing it, and I look forward to seeing what's going to happen over the next year or so. I think this is the start of something really interesting.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for being so positive. And there is a huge amount of information there, so it's going to take us a while to go through it, but that's brilliant. And thanks everyone who sent in information as well. Okay, cheers. I think we're dead on time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.